Well, good morning. It's January 9th, 2023, coming to you live from Northern California, and it is blowing out there, and it is raining like hell. And there's nothing unprecedented about this. Just want to get that on the table as our Governor Newsom is petitioning Biden, to declare this a federal emergency. That's to garner federal funds, which is, states are way too dependent on that. And of course, to continue the climate fear-mongering. I think one of his quotes, and I paraphrase here, was that things are going to get wetter when it's wet and drier when it's dry. Now, there's some science for you. So I thought I'd throw a little science at you. One of the justifications, sadly, for the federal state of emergency is that 12 to 14 people have died here in the state. That's always a tragedy for their families. Without being disrespectful, I'll bet you 3 or 4 of those were foolish behavior by people that don't know, what to do in adverse situations. A lot of people moved here that have never experienced this weather, right? We have a lot of people here who have no clue. Another thing that's occurred is we've built a lot of homes in flat areas with lots of asphalt and storm drains feeding streams that haven't been fed since our last wet cycle in such a fashion. And so there's some unexpected consequences for that. You can do so much planning, but again, indications are that because, it's like this. California doesn't experience droughts so much as everything south of the Cascades, way north, the Oregon border. Everything south of the Cascades is, with the exception of the coastal range and the Sierras, but our valley floor and down into Southern California, we are a semi-arid. Well, if it wasn't for the Pacific Northwest, and if it wasn't for the Pacific Ocean, I mean to say, that we would be in the Southwest, which is an semi-arid to arid geographical area. So we have wet cycles that interrupt that semi-arid, and our wet cycles sometimes they're 2 to 3 years, sometimes they're 3 to 6 years. I've been here 62 years, and since I was a little kid, I've paid a lot of attention to this. But what we call drought is in a lot of ways mismanagement. Our population has increased twofold, I believe, since the last time we built any serious infrastructure. And our water infrastructure was built, by the way, bearing in mind typically 5-year dry wet cycles, that we could always sustain a 5-year period of dry. That was what the Central Valley Project, that was part of what that was about before the climate neuroses set in, and every weather event now is something unprecedented or of significance. So I did I went to Rankers, kind of a popular site relative to California flooding and wet cycles. 1938. Hundreds of people died. 1969, 47 people died. These are all big wet storms. 1939, 45 to 50 people died. By the way, in a state with the biggest population of any state in the Union, again, sympathizing with the families in any tragedy, these are not huge numbers, and certainly these are not emergency numbers. I remember the Loma Prieta earthquake shook about 8 or 12 million people, and I think the casualties was, under 100 or maybe 102 or something. That speaks to how beautifully, actually, mankind can adapt to major events of this nature. 1955, this one sticks out. They just completed Folsom Dam. They wanted to take a couple of years to fill it up, make sure everything was going to hold, right? But they were going to take some time to fill it up, and it was over the spillway year 1. That was 1955, 38 people passed. 1982, the Bay Area had a lot of some fires and then had some flooding and landslide following the early 80s there. 1986, 13 casualties. Sacramento Valley flooding, that was a big one. And in 87 we had some big rains as well, similar to this. one storm right after the other. I will say this. I will absolutely admit, in my 62 years here in Northern California, this wind coming with these storms has been really, really powerful and I would say unusual. I would not deny that. 2005, Southern California. 1964, the 1,000-year flood. That killed 29 people. We had a big snowpack. If we get these warm tropical, what we used to call the Pineapple Express is now the climate river. So let me shut that door right there, lest we be disturbed. So when we get these climate rivers or atmospheric rivers, as they call it, and bringing a lot of moisture, if the snowpack is big or healthy, then that will melt prematurely for us. And we are in a watershed. So California depends on the western slope of the Sierra Nevada, which in most years gets about as much precipitation via snow as any place on Earth because of the Pacific Ocean and the elevation change. That snowpack is our water supply. But back to the floods. 1964, 1995, 97, 28 people in 1995. 1884 had a huge flood here in the Central Valley. Only one person passed. Good for them. Again, 1996 is mentioned here again with 8 casualties. 1950, 9 casualties. I could go on. The bottom line is there's nothing unprecedented about what's going on here. Has it been powerful? You bet. And we need it, by the way. So human flourishing says we need to adapt rather than be terrified of all of this. The climate fanatics, climate very well does change. That's what it's supposed to do. There's a lot of data that indicates that the 20th century, where a lot of our infrastructure across the nation was built, the 20th century was quite a dynamic time, might have actually been one of the more temperate, balanced periods in all of geologic and meteorological history. So our frame of reference, it might be skewed a little bit too as we move into different patterns and whatnot. So anyway, that's enough out of me today. Sounds like somebody's here and the dog is going bananas. The only time she barks is when we're home. So when we're coming home. So I will catch you later. Have a great day. Stay dry and be careful out there. Pay attention.